And you just watched President Biden address the nation live from the Oval Office this evening, his second time in doing so in just 10 days. Good evening, everyone. I'm Heather Holmes.
And I'm Mike Meeback. The president saying, I revere this office, but I love my country more, when speaking about his decision to exit the presidential race. Joining us now in studio, KTVU's Greg Lee, as well as Corey Cook, political science professor from St. Mary's College in Moraga. Greg, I'll begin with you. The president touching on his presidency, his last 3.5 years, but this was about passing the torch to the next generation.
Yeah, this was a solemn message from a guy who has spent more than 50 years in public office, and he looks to frame his legacy in that time. And some would argue, and Democrats would certainly say, this decision will define his legacy because it's looking ahead to what is next. And he said the defense of democracy is more important than any title. But in the same way as he frames that legacy, was trying to defend his record in this 4 years of president, his 50-plus years in office, saying, I believe my record as president, vision for America's future, all merit a second term, but he's choosing not to do that. So we heard those plans for the next 6 months for him, but obviously saying it's time to move on.
Yeah, obviously touting the progress of his administration. But Corey, one thing we did not hear from the president was a clear explanation as to why he made this decision that really, this extraordinary move that has upended the presidential race.
No, he didn't. At no point did he say, I don't believe I can win the election. As you noted, he's talked about his accomplishments. This was very much a legacy-burnishing speech. He obviously was talking about passing the torch to his vice president. He talked about what he was going to do over the next 6 months, but all he said was, I'm trying to unite the party, and I'm trying to unite the country, and I'm not seeking re-election. People forget that Lyndon Johnson's speech, which is remarkable in its own rights, was a 40-minute speech. The last 45 seconds, he said, I will not seek and will not accept the nomination of my party. So to get 15 minutes out of the president talking about his decision not to run is extraordinary, but it's, I imagine, impossible for him to utter the words, I've been told I can't win re-election.
So moving forward, if you're the Vice President Kamala Harris, do you want Joe Biden out there campaigning for you, or are you just trying to separate yourself and focus on
I think this is the tightrope for the vice president now, right? You have to suggest the wins that this administration has had. You took the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS and Science Act. Those are things she can attach her name to. But as the Republican Party and former President Trump try to attach her to say, this is a liberal administration. This is an administration that she was complicit with, and knowing that he was not capable. As they frame those arguments, she has to walk that tightrope of saying, this is who I am and this is what I promise to do if I am elected.
Okay, and Corey, when we talk about Kamala Harris, it took the president about 10 minutes to even mention her name this evening. Was that by design, do you think?
Well, I think so. I mean, ultimately, he had 4 things to do in the speech, right? He had to talk about his legacy, which I think he did very effectively. He talked about what he's going to do for the next 6 months because of all the calls to say, because of his decline, he should step away. I think he was very clear about what he plans to do over the next 6 months. He talked about why he was deciding to drop out. To unite the country was the reason he gave, but he had to mention that. And then he had to pass the baton, right? And I think that was the last step in the speech, to say, I have the full confidence in my vice president. I think to Greg's point, she's got a tightrope to walk. On the one hand, she has an opportunity to really define herself in this race. On the other hand, her Republican opponents are defining her right now. They're spending all of their money to define her. And so on the one hand, she's got to claim all of the success of the administration. But she has an opportunity because she did run against Joe Biden, right? She did have different positions
Differing
on
opinions,
issues.
yeah.
She does have a different political coalition that she brings to bear in this election. So she does need to both, tie herself to the administration and also maybe take a step from it and say, but I will do things different as president.
And she was not in Washington. I mean, she's out there campaigning.
Right.
President Biden is in Washington. Donald Trump, we should mention, tonight campaigning in Charlotte, North Carolina. And he came out swinging tonight, with verbiage that we haven't heard yet since Kamala Harris went in. Let me just give it. Radical left lunatic when talking about the vice president. Extreme liberal. They want me to be nice. I'm not going to be nice. Kamala, you're fired. Get out of here. This is how it's going to be.
Yeah, they're preparing for her to be the nominee, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all signs are that she's the standard bearer for the Democrats, and now he's sharpening his attacks, and that is the plan. And to Corey's point, I think what this election will be about, if it is Trump versus Harris, which it is likely to be, is how do you define Kamala Harris? People in California, people in the Bay Area, we know who she is. We know that she has a record that some raise eyebrows about, specifically when it comes to criminal justice reform and policing. But when you're talking about voters in those Rust Belt states, those areas that Biden typically did well, how do Republicans and Democrats define her in those areas? Is she a California lunatic who is super liberal, or is she generational change that can turn around this party and bring new life and be the first female president?
And the most significant opportunity she has is the selection of her own vice president. Right? So assuming she's the nominee, that's the opportunity for her to define herself.
Because usually that's not a big deal. I mean, it's big, but it's not.
Well, but it is when you're talking about Kamala Harris, who's also trying to appeal to the entire country as opposed to those roots here in California.
Right, and so again, presidential candidates, either they double down on who they are, right? And so you saw that when Bill Clinton chose Al Gore, right? So is she going to double down on who she is? Is she going to pick somebody who gets her some regional diversity? Or is she going to pick somebody who is perceived as strong on issues that she may not be? So does she go for somebody with foreign policy expertise? Does she go to somebody who appeals to rural
Who do you
voters?
believe makes the most sense?
Well, so I have a little office pool going on who I'd pick. But I mean, I think the names that are being bandied about are folks that, by and large, I think people perceive that she should overcome her perceived deficits. I like Gretchen Whitmer. I would double down. For her, I would say you want to pick somebody who will very much reinforce your strengths rather than necessarily operate to sort of dissipate your weaknesses. But I think there are a lot of, the Democratic bench is very, very strong. She has an extraordinary list of candidates, but that decision will in part define the race because it's the single most important decision that she will make in front of the American voters before the election.
I will say the governor of North Carolina, I say North Carolina because that's where Donald Trump was campaigning.
That's right.
He hasn't lost a statewide race, I think, in 6 times.
Yeah, Governor Cooper is strong.
Yep.
Josh Shapiro, Pennsylvania, obviously strong. Senator Mark Kelly, a name that's being thrown out from Arizona. There is concerns, though, for the Democrats that if they lose in a tight Senate race and Mark Kelly moves out, then it creates problems for you in the Senate. But obviously,
we'll find out in less than 2 weeks.
Yep.
That's what they say.
All right, Corey, thank you.
Thank you.
Always a
Thank you
pleasure.
both.
All right.